All right, from a very kind of basic perspective, I think one of the things that I want to show you real quick is just kind of a shortcut to make it a little bit more of a static environment rather than a dynamic or kinetic one. Um, so basically, if you have a tessellated facade, I think that's the term I'm looking for. Um, oh, I forget the building name I'm thinking of. Maybe it's not tessellation. Darn. Oh, can't remember this building name. Something like this is fine. But anyway, so if you need to start to close off the geometry and just make those connections, we've already essentially generated a lot of the information that we would need to generate to do it. The easy way is that you can just isolate your matching lines because this geometry is still built the same way. It's just in a new position. So the zero edge of the old geometry and the zero edge of the new geometry are still the same thing. So you have some economy here to just loft the two of them together. So essentially, this is the old geometry, this is the new geometry, and if I go to well, I guess I have to deconstruct it first. So I'll deconstruct. Oh, that's already deconstructed. This one needs to be deconstructed. And if I go to set list and list item, I can grab the edge of this and the edge of this surface, right? So I have two going in now. It should give me groups of two coming out, but it doesn't look like it is. All right, well, maybe we can't do both at once. I'm trying to keep this one pretty quick. There we go, there we go. And the edge of that. So list item of 0, right? It comes predefined with 0, so I'm not going to put a new slider in there. And a list item of 0 on this one, those two basically match. And so since I have the two separate lines now, I can go to freeform, I can use a ruled surface, and I can connect these two together. And you can see how easy it becomes to start to generate these kind of more static tessellated features. Likewise, if I wanted to connect the bottom of these, I can go from the next index item. So I'll copy and paste this whole feature upwards and just basically give it the next number. In this case, it's going to be a 1. So I plug that into both. And now I've essentially got this whole sort of relief-based, tessellated, triangulated facade that's all rotational. So depending on how you morph and modify your original geometry, this is all now mega tied together, right? So you can start to see the benefits of it being a more parametric feature when you're starting to do this kind of geometrical modification, right? So the next thing that I wanted to essentially get to is not necessarily about that. Turn this off again. What I really wanted to speak to is what happens behind these facades. Okay, so we'll get into some more hardware on the facade itself in a little bit, but what happens behind the facade is really important because it's not necessarily going to sync up exactly with the information that's in front of it. Okay, so if we have another surface that lives behind it, how do we blend the two together in terms of generating hardware that kind of reaches out to it? So we'll do that in a basic fashion. I'm going to have to start by generating an exaggerated example. So I'm going to put I'm going to basically put a secondary surface behind it. It's not going to match the geometry that I created this off of. And I'm going to have to blend the two together and just put a pipe from its original position against this surface back to what we need to attach it to. And this is overly simplified. I just want you to understand the way that you map these things together. So the surface I'm just going to generate is going to be made off of another curve like this. And it doesn't really matter. I guess it doesn't really matter how you do it, but I'm just going to do something like this. Okay, so it doesn't exactly match. And actually, I wish that I had extruded that an exact amount before, because I want this to be the exact amount too. But I can ballpark it here. Oh, that's right, I'm on grid settings. So you might not be on grid settings, but I happen to be on grid snap, so I know that this is exactly the same height. Okay, so imagine that this is your building face, and you have, you know, slab here, slab a third of the way up, slab 2/3 of the way up, and then your roof at the top. Okay, we're still very basic, very abstract. But what I want to do is I want to run a system, a structural system back that's going to support this thing. And I'm going to start off just by creating a pipe from my old surface to, or from my previous geometry that I generated back to this surface. So I'll reference this in, and oh, that's right. That one has to be a B-rep. Sorry, because it's not a loft. It's a, I did this one by extrusion, and I'll turn that. Whoops, turn that layer off. There we go. Sorry, I'm getting all screwed up here. Go back to this. Turn that off. Okay. All right. So the important thing here is that when you're trying to sync up geometry, you can do the same feature, but the actual subdivision has to happen as a separate operation, but it should have the same number of sliders, or exactly the same slider connections. So I'll grab these two and just kind of pull them down and replace the surface connection like that. So now with that on, what you'll see is that the subdivisions essentially do not sync up. Did it go the opposite direction? Ooh, it did. Look at that. That's funny. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see this, but what happened was my U and my V direction flipped with the new surface that I created, and it's probably because I created them two different ways. Right, the other one I lofted, this one I extruded. So what I'm going to do here in Rhino is go back to this, and I'm actually just going to copy the line up. Whoops, sorry. Let's see, Alt. Copy the line up, and then I'll loft the two of them. We'll try it that way. My mistake, everyone. And I'll use a surface instead of that. There we go. All right, that syncs up. Yeah. Perfect. Do you guys need me to pause for a moment or no?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. I'll give you time to get caught up, and then we'll move into the actual connection.